Robservations with Robert, Meyer, Burnett.
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi and cinema, your evangelist of the imagination, and of course, your existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, me, Robert Meyer Burnett, and I am robcasting at you imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. This is a show that is not above putting its technical difficulties front and center for you to just show you that I'm a real person after all and not an egomaniacal narcissist who is beyond reproach. No, I make mistakes. I'm a deeply flawed individual. I admit that. But I do try and bring you great entertainment here on YouTube. And I do appreciate all of the amazing support you give this channel. So, hey, because I make these admissions and talk about my fallibility, please subscribe to this channel, smash that like button, hit the indicator bell. You know, I never ask you to do that, but by God, why not just do it? Could be fun. You never know. I'll tell you what is fun, though. I love doing shows about my passionate subjects, and sometimes you just never know who might be tuning in. So I got a Facebook message today from somebody that I don't know, and nor was I friends with them. Mr. Jeff Rake. Who is Jeff Rake, you might ask? You don't have to Google it, because I'm going to tell you. Jeff Rake is the creator, wait for it, of Manifest. And he sent me a Facebook message. Check it out. Jeff Rake, we're not friends on Facebook. Thanks for the Manifest love and leaving no stone unturned or no opportunity that presents itself. I won't let it get away. Would you come on my YouTube show for a long-form interview? It could be epic. Hashtag save Manifest. My God, Mr. Rake, I promise if you watch my interviews with David Goodman, the current president of the Writers Guild of America and executive producer of The Orville, or watch my great interview, if I do say so myself, with Brian Fuller, the creator of Hannibal, you will see what a great conversation that we're going to have. And I will tell you, I will express my profound and boundless love for your show Manifest and its cast, and I will also would love to delve into the ultimate gobbledygook of your impossible premise that I came to know and love. I don't think you're beyond that kind of a conversation. Let's do it, Jeff. Jeff, you wrote to me. I'm reaching out to you. Let's do a whole Save Manifest Day. As a matter of fact, if there can be Captain Picard Day yesterday and we get a poster of the Los Angeles freeway to celebrate Star Trek, we can damn well make up a Save Manifest Day. Why not? It's our Manifest Destiny. Yeah, that's right. As a matter of fact, that's what we're going to call our day. Hashtag Manifest Destiny. Join me and Jeff Rake right here on this channel. I know it's wish fulfillment. It hasn't happened yet, but you never know. You just never know what's going to happen here on Robservations. With your support, maybe I'll be able to stream with Jeff Rake, the creator of Manifest, the #1 show on Netflix last week. Come on now. Make it happen. Let's flash dance that shit up, son. We'll take our passion and we'll make it happen. Flash dance. That's right. First, when there's nothing. You know what? Irene Cara, God love her. Where'd she go? Anyway, so As a lot of you know, I'm always looking for subjects to discuss on this show. And one of my newer go-to places to go for things to read or to look at is Richard Rushfield's great industry blog. And yes, you have to get a subscription. The Ankler. I love it. And, a lot of the time I don't share stuff I read, although I do read it all, and I do love his blog, and I do subscribe to it. And a lot of the time I feel like I always forget. I'm like, that was a good article. I want to share that with you because I think a lot of the time what he's saying is really good. So he wrote an article that I thought was worth sharing, and I want to share it with you right now. It is an article called "The Box Office Strikes Back at Gross Range." You see what Richard did there? Thought it was good. So anyway, let me read this article. It was published on June 15th, 2 days ago. Again, this is from Richard Rushfield's The Ankler, from theankler.com. If you're interested in the business of entertainment, I highly recommend it. He's always got interesting takes. But here's a take from June 15th. This is Richard Rushfield. For a year and a half now, we've been waiting for the movies to come roaring back, with the general assumption that when the audiences returned once again, studios could just stand outside with their umbrella upside down and they'd fill right up with all the doubloons raining down. The part that we forget about from way back when was that even in those halcyon pre-COVID days, not every movie became a hit. In fact, hardly any did. And as the decade just dragged on, there were moments when it seemed like nothing was ever going to be a hit again. Remember that? Deadline dryly put it. The muted performance of both In the Heights and Peter Rabbit 2 also underscores how product-driven the theatrical business remains. Still, with the product-driven, shouldn't we be past that by 2021 with our data and algorithms and micro-targeting? Even after all that, after all the know-how that the tech companies brought to our shores, we're still stuck with this problem of making something these ingrates want to see. How unfair is that? To make it even more unjust, even pre-COVID, they didn't want to see very much. At all. Anyway, this weekend shows us a few of the perils and pitfalls inherent in this brave new age after the window. We grapple for a new model, but does the new model want to come out and play? Let's poke through the bitter lessons of this past weekend. Quiet Riot. So, Quiet Place 2 is not only holding up, but raking it in, comparable to the numbers of the original. Which kind of ruins it for everyone else, because if it weren't for this movie, they could say people just aren't quite there yet with going back to theaters. On the list of experiences people can't get in their living rooms, seeing a horror movie with other screaming people have to be near the top. It's also one that the young folk haven't completely given up on. Ankler rule numero uno. A hit changes everything. A month ago, Paramount was the flotsam of the streaming war. Now they're the only ones who know how to get people in the theaters. Heights that hand the feeds. Heights the hand that feeds. Installment number 27,646 of why listening to the media bubble, unless you're in the business of making a niche awards bait TV show for 400,000 people, will always steer you wrong. If you follow the media bubble, you would assume Lin-Manuel Miranda is the biggest star on Earth. Something along the lines of Clark Gable, Orson Welles, and Fred Astaire combined. So it's nice to get a reminder that despite his enormous talents, outside Mediaville, USA, no one has any idea who Lin-Manuel Miranda is. Quiz for you. Who is America's second most popular playwright right now? Exactly. The fact that he played the Dick Van Dyke role in the misfired Mary Poppins reboot and hosted Saturday Night Live does not make someone in someone's work the stuff of box office titanium. Which makes you wonder whether Disney had perhaps known this when they steered Hamilton to Disney Plus early in the COVID era. The movie is good as it could be, looks energetic and bright and fun, but it has no stars and the marketing told no story beyond Lin-Manuel in a musical. That said, Greatest Showman opened lower than this, at $8 million. Musicals can play on and on forever if a song or two catches on with the young folk. That is, except for one thing which we'll now run a little test on. Will the death of the window and the max availability keep the kids who would have kept the film going theatrically watching it at home instead? And what he means by that is the window meaning a 45-day theatrical window as opposed to a 90-day theatrical window. And if it's available on streaming concurrently with its run in the theaters, will people stay home and watch it streaming instead? On the flip side of that, does the calculus change later down the line? If theaters keep a greater slice of weekend 4 grosses, does it take fewer new subscribers to match what the studios would lose on those weeks? If so, fine for the studios. But another way of cutting the bloodied theaters off the knees? Yet another reason for making these calculations about how to divide up a shrinking theatrical pie are not going to be making anyone happy if someone doesn't figure out how to grow the pie a little bit and soon. Finally, if Lin-Manuel Miranda got in trouble over representational issues over this, what hellfires await Steven Spielberg in West Side Story, for whom there is absolutely no reservoir of goodwill in wokedom? Bunny Bones. If you really want to look to the slaughterhouse of the streaming wars in the eye, take a look at Peter Rabbit 2 and the larger Sony-ness around it. It's not just that Rabbit fell short, it's that it came in behind a movie that is also playing at home and is not available at home. Not bulking up a streaming service, not helping Sony build another business beyond providing more chattel for their output deals. With A Quiet Place 2 proving that people will turn out for the movies, The Gentleman's Sea is no longer available for surefire sequels that open to $10 million. But unfortunately, Peter Rabbit 2 comes in what is now a fairly lengthy line of recent Sony flops, as they seem to have spent these COVID days dumping their inventory, which they can't unload outright. Here are the last 6 Sony releases with their opening weekend numbers. Peter Rabbit 2 at $10 million, The Unholy at $3 million, Monster Hunter at $2 million, The Broken Hearts Gallery at $1 million, Bloodshot with $9 million. Screen Gems, if you want to go back further, has bombed on 8 of their last 9 at a time when horror films are the one thing still working everywhere else. Are they just dumping these films so they can feed them into output deals? If so, herein lies the problem of the arms dealer strategy. If everything you produce that isn't a part of the Spider-Verse bombs, then what is your value as a producer? And if you're Ambi, how much longer can you expect your losses to look the other way? It worked for a time, slashing costs, a few surprise hits, but the road is getting narrower, and a studio without a service and without hits doesn't have a lot of room to flounder anymore. For someone who postures as the executive of the arts, the man who put creative in creative executive, has Ambi broken any original ground? He's got the Spider-Verse that Amy Pascal put into motion, and the Jumanji reboot, and beyond that, a break-even deal with Quentin? Meanwhile, as the studio's footprint shrinks, its labels multiply. There are more subdivisions floating around Sony than on any other lot. And his pre-COVID answer to the problem? Set up yet another division with Elizabeth Gabler. Meanwhile, if Tom goes, will Tokyo install the next white guy in line, plucked off the course at Bel Air? Might it soon be time for a new direction beyond cost-cutting? And so on. While no one was watching, Raya and the Last Dragon keeps chugging away, even though it's been available at home for months now. It kept quietly making a little money through it all. Whatever the impact Cruella had on Disney Plus, however, that circa 2018 era when any Disney title was a guaranteed world-devouring titan, the days when they said, I think we'll take March 4th or March 14th, and every other studio scrambled to pack their bags and rearrange their calendars in terror, well, that's clearly behind us. There's no such thing as a box office guarantee anymore, even for Disney, even perhaps for Marvel. Which brings us back to the question of movie theaters. If we're going to go in a few years from 6 studios releasing 20 films each a year, a handful of those preordained blockbusters to 5 or 4 or 3 studios releasing 10 or less films each, with the sure things fewer and further between, with a shortened window, how much is that cutting back the movie arsenal theaters have to work with? By 2/3? That feels like a conservative guess. How do theaters survive that? There are signs of life again, signs that people still want to see movies, that good movies are clearly marketed, will find audiences, but it's within the context of a general decline and a sick ecosystem that, it's too early to say, but shows plenty of death spiral-like symptoms. Change is going to come. It can come the easy way, taking big chances, trying different things, making itself deeply relevant to a new generation, or it can come the hard way. But it is coming. Any studio exec who thinks that even 3 years from now they'll basically be doing what they're doing now at this point doesn't just need a career change. They need professional help. Sorry, I messed up reading that a little bit, but I really liked that article, and I liked what it had to say. The fact that where the movie business is going, I know we're reopening. Theoretically, LA is all reopened now. I'm still going to be wearing a mask when I go out into public, but why not? But the idea that the movie business still needs movies to play if theatrical is going to exist. So it's a very difficult situation for all around. And the real question is, we are still, make no mistake, we are still in a situation where I think all of these movies might be underperforming unless there's something that's really going to get people to come out with really big brand names, whether it's A Quiet Place 2, whether it's Pixar, whether it's Disney. I think those people, we've got a Pixar movie opening this weekend, and, we'll see if people turn out. But we're still in the early days. I don't think it's all doom and gloom, and obviously we have tentpoles coming out. But I would say that, you know what? I think now is the time when movie theaters are so reliant upon studio product that they're still on life support, even though there's shenanigans with their stock prices and things like that. We really have to make sure, if we want to live in a world where there are movie theaters, that the studios, they're the only people feeding the ecosystem, and the indies. I think it's time to really step up the game. I've often wondered, what IPs are they going to be working off of in 20 years? I mean, do our IPs have a shelf life? Star Trek is, after all this year, 55 years old. Of course, we're not getting anything theatrically from that franchise. Star Wars is 44 years old. But where are the new franchises? Where are the new IPs? Where are the Fast and the Furious franchise is 2 decades old. What we need are new IPs. We need new, bold storytelling. Otherwise, I don't think movies are going to survive, and I want them to survive, because there's only so long that everybody's going to watch 20-year-old franchises come back to movie theaters. Heck, even the MCU is 13 years old. We've got another Jurassic Park movie coming down the pike. Actually, we've got a lot of movies coming down the pike. We've got all the Marvel movies that I am still a huge Marvel fanboy, a Marvel Cinematic Universe fanboy. We got Black Widow, we got Shang-Chi, we got the Eternals, and Spider-Man. And that's just in the next 6 months. 4 Marvel films. How cool is that? We shall see. But I think that it's time that we need to start seeing some really interesting choices being made. And really, let's take some risks. Hey, studios, maybe not spend as much money, but find some really interesting material out there. Start betting on new filmmakers. Take some risks. Take some chances. I know maybe people won't show up for the movie theaters for those either, but I mean, Peter Rabbit 2, a family film, you can't get people back into theaters yet. That's rough. That's rough. Now, I don't know how to change it up. I don't know how to make things better. But I do know that if we want the theatrical business to survive, the only way it can survive is if great movies are being made that people want to see. You can't just rely on sequels and other things. You've got to really step up your game. We need, where's the next Back to the Future? Where's that? I don't know. We shall see. Maybe one day. But I don't know. I'm worried. I'm worried about our theaters, people. I'm worried about our theaters. I'm going to start this letter. I'm going to start hearing from you. Stubble McShave is here. Stubble McShave says, "Hi, Rob, and the Post-Geek Singularity. You've been talking about Raiders of the Lost Ark recently, since it celebrated its anniversary the other week. I wanted to address a certain aspect of the first 3 movies. I won't go into the Crystal Skull because I've only watched it once when it premiered in theaters. First, I want to mention that Raiders is clearly my favorite. It will always be my favorite. It's close to a perfect movie. Temple of Doom and Last Crusade share second place for me. It depends on my mood, which I prefer at any given time. But what I really want to discuss are the openings to the three movies. An opening to a movie needs to establish a few things. It should set the tone for the movie. Will it be whimsical? Will it be action-filled? Will it be humorous? Will it be adventurous? Will it be dark and gritty, or will it be hopeful? It should set up the genre of the movie. Is it a romance movie? A horror movie? A science fiction movie? Or maybe a comedic fantasy in the style of a Terry Pratchett story? It doesn't have to, but it should also introduce the main character and show what kind of a character he or she is. In short, the opening should have an indication of what type of story we're going to get. Now, if we look to the three Indiana Jones movies, they do this to a varying degree. Raiders has one of the best openings of any movie. It establishes the character, it sets the tone, which is one of dangerous adventure with some comedic desperation and interesting settings. It clearly shows we're in for an adventure movie. In fact, the opening is a mini version of the whole movie. He looks for a treasure in an ancient location. There are dangerous animals, and he has to avoid a lot of traps and other obstacles. He gets the price that he's after, only to have it taken from him at the end. I think you meant prize. It also sets up the main villain as a foil for Indy. It is a perfect opening. When you look at Temple of Doom, there's another story. Its opening is fun. It's like a Bond movie set in the late 30s. It has some raunchy humor, quick-witted repartee, an elaborate musical number, some hijinks, some cool action, and a lot of levity. It's a great opening. If it hadn't been followed by a movie that reflected the promise of the opening. The movie itself doesn't have much comedy except for the grossing out scenes that involves Willie Scott in the first half of the movie. The movie doesn't have the same levity as the opening. In fact, for most of the part, it's pretty dark and gritty. There isn't a lot of interesting conversation in the movie apart from some lines during the dinner scene. Sometimes I wish that we would have gotten the movie that the opening promised us we would get. Temple of Doom has nice scenes, but I think that it was too dark and depressing at times, and I found some parts of the movie boring, and that's never good in an Indiana Jones movie. In The Last Crusade, we have an adventurous opening which shows Indiana Jones as a resourceful young man getting the crucifix from the grave robbers. He's pursued in a hijinks adventure with both elements of danger and levity. He's successful in his endeavors only to lose the crucifix at the end. It reflects the movie pretty well. Of course, I have some issues with both the movie and the opening. It seemed silly that all the elements of his character would be established during this short adventure during his youth. He gets the hat, his scar, the first training with a whip, and his fear of snakes during one short adventure. I didn't like that the characters of Sala and Donovan were relegated, Salaga and Brody, were relegated to comic relief. I did, however, like the dynamic between Indy and his father. Anyway, in short, I think Raiders is a great movie with a perfect opening. Temple of Doom is a flawed movie with an opening that's much more compelling than what the movie is. And finally, The Last Crusade has a suitable opening for the kind of movie it is, but I find flaws with both the opening and the movie itself for sacrificing verisimilitude for levity in a way that you notice more and more every time you watch it. So, Rob, what do you think of different openings of the first three Indiana Jones movies? Do you agree or disagree? Well, Stubble, I think you pretty much summed it up quite well. I think Raiders is a near-perfect movie. The only thing anybody can complain about is the fact that Indiana Jones, that the U-boat doesn't dive when it's going to the island to experiment on the Lost Ark of the Covenant, which I've never really thought of as a mistake. The U-boat just didn't dive. Why would it? War hasn't yet broken out, really, and of course, it takes a lot of battery power to stay submerged, and if it's not wartime, there's no reason for that U-boat to submerge, so I've never seen it. See, to me, I'll tell you something. A plot hole is something that cannot be explained away. In the case of that movie, in the case of Raiders, the U-boat didn't submerge because it didn't have to. So Indiana Jones didn't know that, but, at the time, he was taking a risk, and it didn't submerge. You have to take it on faith that that's exactly what happened. And people are like, no, it was the comic book adaptation and the novelization. It doesn't matter. It just didn't submerge. And I don't see that as a plot hole. That's the logical assumption you have to make because he was able to hold on to the periscope the whole time. So there you go. What else can you do? That's all you can say. Omar94 writes in. I'm going to go with Omar up front here. Hi, Rob, moderators, and the Post-Geek Singularity. I started thinking about your dislike for all the Star Trek movies and TV shows since the 2009 movie, but how you still watch the TV shows even though you dislike them. For me, I've done something similar to that with TV shows over the years when I haven't really liked them a whole lot when they started, but I kept watching them until the ending. I remember when I started to watch the original Untouchables TV show. Early on in the show, I wasn't really enjoying it, but I watched it to the end of the series, and it didn't change my feelings. The original Man from U.N.C.L.E. TV show is a bit like that for me as well. I enjoyed the first season, but I wasn't enjoying it when season 2 started. From then on, I didn't enjoy the series, but I kept watching it to the very end. Having seen the show to the very end, I only liked the first season. I wanted to stop when I started to dislike certain TV shows, but I didn't. I want to stop, but I have a hard time doing so. I don't know why, but it might be me trying to judge the show fairly since I feel like I have to see the entire series to judge it fairly. I don't know about you watching all the Star Trek shows, but that's just me when it comes to watching certain TV shows. Thanks, and live long and prosper. Well, Omar, a lot of people ask me that. They're like, Rob, why don't you just not watch Star Trek? And I would say for most TV shows, most things like that, that's obviously a pretty good thing to say. Here's why I can't do that. Because Star Trek to me was, well, it's kind of my personal religion. Before everyone's like, wow, that's weird. I don't mean like in terms of a savior or something like that. But I loved the Star Trek universe beginning when I was a kid. 5 years old, whatever. I loved everything about Star Trek. I loved the design of the Enterprise, of course. Still to this day, nothing excites me like the design of the Starship Enterprise. I loved all the characters. I love the situations. I love the colors. But what was really interesting about Star Trek fandom, when I was a kid, it spilled off the TV screen. You could buy a model kit of the Enterprise or a Klingon battlecruiser or later K-7 or the shuttlecraft or the exploration set with the tricorder, the communicator, and the phaser. Then they published things like in 1975, the Franz Joseph Technical Manual and the blueprints. And suddenly I had the technical manual and the blueprints to look at. And they were in a different medium. There was literally blueprints of the Enterprise where you could look at the ship deck by deck. You could memorize the deck. You could see, oh my God, the Enterprise has a bowling alley on it. That was not necessarily canonical, although it really was, because Kevin Riley did say that there was a dance in the bowling alley in the episode The Naked Time, which happened very early on in the series. So yes, there was a bowling alley in the Enterprise. Now, I loved Star Trek, and I love the fact that my fandom had leapt off the page and into my... there were books, the James Blish adaptations, and there was the novel Spock Messiah and Spock Must Die, and there were comic books and Mego action figures, so Star Trek could live in my mind beyond when I was just watching it. There was no VCR, so you couldn't watch it over and over again, even though you could watch it every night on Channel 11 in Seattle at 6 o'clock. So what I didn't quite understand, but it appeared to me that there were other talented people beyond those that were actually making Star Trek, and Star Trek hadn't been made since the late 60s, but that were adding to the tapestry of what Star Trek was. The animated series, also created by Gene Roddenberry, a lot of the same writers, the same voice actors with the exception of Walter Koenig. A lot was going on there, so I got an animated series. And in my mind, none of it was not canonical. It was all Star Trek because we hadn't got there yet as a fan base, as fandom. We didn't understand, or at least I certainly didn't understand what was canonical and what was not canonical. And as I grew up and changed and evolved, there has been new Star Trek for my entire life. Literally. Since Star Trek started on TV before I was born, and during my entire lifetime, there has been new and growing and interesting Star Trek. But something shifted in 2009 when J.J. Abrams and crew and Bad Robot took over the franchise and then later Secret Hideout. They were no longer beholden to the single living growing universe that I was a fan of. The chronologies, the spaceflight chronologies, the Star Trek chronologies, the encyclopedias, all the novels, everything that was being made. They decided to get rid of all of that and literally reboot the Star Trek universe in a different universe entirely. And so from then on, this thing that part of what I loved about Star Trek is as I grew and changed, I didn't love all modern Star Trek equally. I didn't love Star Trek The Next Generation as much as I love Deep Space Nine, or as much as I love Voyager, or as less as I love Voyager or Enterprise. I mean, there were great episodes in all of the shows. I didn't dismiss just one show out of hand. I mean, I did at one point, but there's stuff to be found in all these shows that I enjoy. And they all added to this rich, lifelong tapestry for me. But now what I find very strange is that modern Star Trek since 2009 has wanted to go back and change Star Trek into something else, rather than continue the growth of what I loved to see my whole life. People like, well, Rob, Star Trek is for the modern age. I would say this. My problem with modern Star Trek is that it's bad. It's badly written. Now, it's fine. There's going to be people that I really like it. I don't begrudge you if you really like it. But your relationship to the franchise, and I know there's some people, is just different than mine. I'm not saying it's better or worse. It's just different. And for me, my problem with Star Trek is everybody who's been working on Star Trek for the last 12 years has tried to turn it into something else under the mistaken impression that they can't add to it. And in doing that, they've gone back and they're trying to change the original Star Trek. And I know a lot of people would say, well, Rob, no one's trying to, the original Star Trek's always going to be there. It is, but the people that are making original the Discovery or now Strange New Worlds are trying to tell us that their version of Star Trek is different than what we grew up with. They're changing things, and they're acting like their Star Trek is supplanting what we've had. And I don't like that. That would be like somebody trying to rewrite Shakespeare. Am I equating Star Trek to Shakespeare? In a way, because Shakespeare wrote for the masses, but his work lasted hundreds of years. So now we revere it as a classic. I mean, indeed it is. But my whole thing about Star Trek is that, again, why do you have to change it? Why not add to the tapestry of the Star Trek universe? Why go back and say, you know what? Here's our show. It's set in the same time period, but it looks nothing like. It's a visual reboot. So if it's a visual reboot, it's not part of the thing. But anyway, I've talked about this ad infinitum, but that's why. That's all I'm saying today. So there you go. Very, very, very. It's just a weird thing. It's just a weird thing. You know what else is a weird thing? Darren McKinnon is not a weird thing, but he wrote a letter that I think is terrific. That kind of falls along the same lines. Hi, Rob. I've been meaning to write for a while. Several subjects come to mind, and then they left my mind. But here's one that's been sticking out for a while. Am I an imagination connoisseur? I watch your show, admittedly not as much as a few weeks ago, and I feel more and more on the outside. It seems the topics are ones that I have no attachment to. All these shows that are discussed are foreign to me. Movies I'm not interested in, streaming services I'm not subscribed to. I don't even have a cell phone, for Christ's sake. I am not interested in the MCU, the DC, EU, Star Wars, not anymore anyway, comics and all that stuff. Real Star Trek, though, is the exception, however. Pre-2009 Star Trek. You see, Discovery and Picard are embarrassments. Yes, sir, they are. I do like good stories. I just don't find the stories in the comic book world compelling. I find them all the same. And I also find that we as a society are very easily satisfied by them. If I lived in Pasadena, I think this would be a very interesting topic to discuss with you in person. I've always found you to be a completely open-minded person, and you probably would understand. Maybe that's why I still watch your show, Rob. Even now, I feel on the outside. Your analysis of story, presentation, ideas, and art is refreshing. I would enjoy debating with you. You have a keen mind. Although I'm certain I would not have the assets to last very long in a debate, or rather a discussion with you. Oh, I doubt that. I bet we would have a lot to discuss. I tuned out of the MCU years ago, but every once in a while I'll catch one of these MCU movies on TV. I sometimes stop to check out if it's one I haven't seen, and there are several. Take Doctor Strange, for example. It was on TV recently. I stopped to watch and very quickly asked myself, why am I watching this? I saw no appeal. Same thing for Thor Ragnarok. I'm not writing to criticize people who enjoy all of this, but rather as an attempt to understand why I don't care for this new wave of super stuff and why so many people do. What is the definition of imagination connoisseur? What does the Venn diagram look like? Where do I find myself on the organization chart if I can't stand comic book movies and shows but enjoy The Twilight Zone, Real Star Trek, The Iron Giant, A Monster Calls, Run Lola Run, Planet of the Apes, the original? Well, I won't list everything I like. Let's just say there's less and less new stuff that draws my attention. I feel I'm waiting for a time when entertainment won't be saturated with comic books stuff. When will the comic book craze burst? Rob, many thanks and take care. Darren. Moncton, New Brunswick, Canada. P.S. I thought of you when I saw the news of the release of the following book by Philip Ball. The Modern Myths, Adventures in the Machinery of the Popular Imagination. Ooh, I have not heard of this. I assume you've heard of it. I have not, but that sounds right up my alley. PPS, how do you write connoisseur? Connoisseur is correct. I'm too lazy to look it up. I'm bilingual and in French, where the term comes from, it is spelled connoisseur, Connaisseur. But who cares, right? Well, I was always told, I looked it up, connoisseur, Connoisseur. But yes, people have corrected me and said the French way is the proper way. But who cares, right? No, I'd like to be proper. If I'm misspelling it, that's how I've always spelled it. But I think, Sir Darren, you bring up a good question. What is an imagination connoisseur? I remind you that in about 2 weeks, we're going to officially launch the short story competition, relaunch the short story competition. And remember this, by the way, Zevius, the great Zevius, who's done artwork for me, and he has a keen mind, created this. This is a potential cover for the book, The Imagination Connoisseurs, which is what our short story contest is all about. The whole book is to define what is an imagination connoisseur. So, Darren, there you go. The short story competition, that's your overriding theme, is what is an imagination connoisseur? What does it mean to be one? What is the definition of one? I don't necessarily have one. I just made up that term to sort of stand in for geek or nerd, what have you. I chose to give it, I like the term imagination connoisseurs, but to answer the question, anyone can be there is no set definition as to there are no parameters necessarily. It's very open-ended, kind of like the cosmos. So to me, the imagination would assume that it's all about unreality, meaning fantasy. But I would say fantasy, science fiction, and horror in all of its myriad forms, whether it's video games, whether it's comic books. I would say it all comes under the title of imagination connoisseur. But really what it's all about is enjoying the fantastical to add more grounding to your reality. I mean, if you want me to give you a definition, an imagination connoisseur is somebody that uses the fantastical to give them more of a grounding in reality. How about that? By the way, I just made that shit up on the spot. I didn't even think that up until just now. But that's kind of what it is. And using the Twilight Zone or Star Trek or whatever your favorite franchise is, there's a truth in the fantasy. And that fantasy transcends the fantastical, and it informs your reality. And I think that's why imagination connoisseurs are imagination connoisseurs. The very best flights of fancy have a lot to say about the world that we live in. That's why the Twilight Zone endures. That's why Star Trek endures. That's why a lot of these things endure. And they also are sort of timeless. They don't tend to date beyond, I would say, at least the stories don't date. Sure, the superficiality of it all can date, but are the stories timeless? Sometimes stories might seem timeless and they quickly date. I don't know. That's up for people to say, but yeah. So that's what the short story competition's about. You can either write a story that might appeal to imagination connoisseurs, or you might write a short story that will have something to do with being an imagination connoisseur. You might want to try and define an imagination connoisseur, or tell an autobiographical story where you realized you were an imagination connoisseur. So the book that we're going to publish through this channel, and slipcased hardcover, Mike, slipcased hardcover, is going to be called The Imagination Connoisseurs, and it's going to be written by all of you. So there you go. But yeah, it's coming, Darren. It's coming. But you know what? Here's the thing. You don't have to feel like you're left out. You know, you can have a very your connection, or you're being an imagination connoisseur. You might like more classical material. There's nothing wrong with that. I have friends that only listen to classical music. You know, that doesn't mean they're not music fans because they don't have every Led Zeppelin album, or they don't know that Uma Guma was a Pink Floyd record. You know, it's up to you to define yourself. Being an imagination connoisseur means never letting anyone else define you. So there you go. That's part of it too. That's part of it. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's I think that's part of the whole. That's part of the whole dealio, yo. Now, here's another letter from our friend Emilio Hansen. Emilio. I miss Man of Steel. I was never the biggest supporter of the movie when it came out. I liked it, but I never loved it. But I miss the movie now, because those movies are pretty dead now. I think that it's interesting how people try and copy Marvel and nobody succeeds, and if they can just do what they do. Feige spent a lot of years before he made Iron Man and Hulk. He was a producer for a lot of Marvel projects, and while other people were chasing a trend, adapting silly comic books into more adult and serious depictions, Feige seemed to have always come back to the source material. Hence, Wolverine has a weird haircut in the first X-Men movie. That was actually Lauren Schuler Donner who made sure that happened. So to think that people can just look at what he's accomplished and go, I want that, and think they have a chance when they never spent the time and work that Feige has before they embark on the endeavor of having a cinematic superhero universe, it's stupid. And yet that's exactly what Warner Brothers did. While Snyder did something original, completely different from the MCU, they wanted to Marvelize their movies and pushed his ideas away. I don't think that his movies, if they had continued, would have been as successful, even more than the MCU. I doubt that, but at least they would have offered something unique. Warner Brothers had all the resources they needed. They had DC characters way bigger than Marvel characters. They had success with the Batman trilogy, which set a trend more than followed one. And they had a good director in Zack Snyder, because he'd adapted Watchmen and Frank Miller's 300 before he did Man of Steel. Goyer worked on Nolan's Batman movies. They had so much potential. When Superman, who is looked upon as a god, is forced to get his hands dirty and murder General Zod, it was like seeing Santa Claus being a drunk alcoholic. It was almost philosophical. People can have doubts about their faith or ideas in real life, and there's a comic book movie tackling those same issues. So much for silly nonsense. Snyder doesn't even look at Marvel movies as a way to succeed. He just dismisses them as the flavor of the week or simple action comedies. Yet I love Marvel movies, but I feel like I will have forever missed out on seeing something different. I think Warner Brothers made a huge mistake. Maybe movies like Black Adam will still live in that vein of Man of Steel, but I don't know. I miss that movie. Also, Snyder is not just doing fan projects. For example, let's say he had a brother who was a fan of Green Lantern, so he spends $100 million to make a Green Lantern movie. And he's not just doing random crap to seem edgy like the Horrible Titans show. He has put a lot of thought in what he does. He is one of the few directors who can point at things and explain why he put them there. Not just mystery excuses, real thoughts. He cared about his projects. Maybe he cared a bit too much. I don't know. Well, yeah, I mean, look, I think Zack Snyder is at his best when he's working with other writers. I mean, judging from Sucker Punch and judging from Army of the Dead, writing is not his strong suit. But, I do think he has a very distinct point of view and a very interesting visual style, so I hope he keeps making movies. And I agree with you. I really like Man of Steel. I really would have liked to have seen that continue. I thought, unfortunately, Batman v Superman, I would have liked to have seen Zack Snyder's take on Batman and then his take on Superman, and then bring those two characters together with the added sprinkling of Wonder Woman. I think that would have been great, but I think you're right. Unfortunately, we live in a time where everyone's pointing their fingers over at Marvel and going, I want to be able to do that, now on streaming as well, and it's tough. I feel your pain. I would have liked to have seen Man of Steel go on. Hi, Rob. Guten Tag, PGS. I was thinking the other day about... Oh, this, by the way, comes from our friend Joe Dick. touch him, he's dick. I was thinking the other day about some of the changes that are made between a movie version and its source material. Sometimes it's hard to understand why some changes are made. In the comic book, Thanos uses the Infinity Gauntlet to kill half of everything to impress death. In the movie, it's because of limited resources. But he could just use the stones to create more resources. He's a nut who wants to kill, I guess, and needs justification. I've seen a lot of people praise this change, dismissing the original idea as cheesy, but for me a big part of the appeal of comic books is the cheese. I didn't like the Nolan Batman movies because they were so serious that they became their own parody. And Gotham didn't look like Gotham, it looked like any other city, or Chicago where it was filmed. I couldn't help thinking how much Gotham looked like Chicago. Then I couldn't help but be reminded of a bit from Austin Powers 2 when he makes the observation that England looks in no way like Southern California. One of the reasons I didn't like the look of Justice League was the lack of colorful costumes. I don't know if we need dull colors to make the costumes more palatable or the idea of superheroes more plausible. They're not plausible at all, not even Batman, but that's not a criticism. They should embrace the implausibility. You don't need the Speed Force to explain the Flash, although I know that originated in the comics. Sometimes it goes the other way. I think kryptonite came from the Superman radio show. So to me, Thanos killing half of all life to impress the embodiment of death makes perfect sense by making no sense. The reason they chose for the movie makes much less sense and lacks the charm of a little of the old fromage. Just like how for me a lot of the charm of the original Star Wars movies is the bad dialogue. Something the serials it was based on definitely had. So yeah, couldn't Thanos use the stones to create more resources? Maybe there's some reason I missed that he couldn't. In Star Trek, when in Deep Space Nine they wanted money to exist after all, they said that latinum couldn't be replicated. Can it be transported? If so, they should be able to replicate it. Maybe they went with the energy can't be created or destroyed idea. The universe, they figure, might have a finite amount of energy. We used to think that about wealth. It's the reason empires existed. You could only get richer by taking the riches from someone else. Then someone invented the stock market. Now most of the money in the world doesn't exist except as numbers on a computer, and we get to look down our noses at past civilizations who had empires. I was watching a video a while back on a channel called Kurzgesagt. They were talking about this for now purely theoretical ideas of being able to use a certain type of black holes as a power source. Although we can't obviously test the idea, it suggests we shouldn't give up hope. Even when all the stars in the universe are gone, civilization could survive. If you want to post the link, here it is. I will post the link. And I'll put it in the live chat and see what you all have to say. Here it is. Here's the link. This is nothing to the energy that Thanos could summon with the Infinity Gauntlet. I seem to remember he later gets on Death's bad side and she punishes him by giving him true immortality. This could have come into play when Thor finally did kill Thanos. He wouldn't have been able to. The final fight in the comic when Thanos still had the stones, well, I guess the writers thought this was too much of a challenge to believably have Thanos lose when he's holding all the cards. If he destroys the stones first, then he could be defeated. There are a lot of examples where the source material is superior to the movie version. Some people figure the book is always going to be better, or sometimes it's equally good in a different way. I love the novella Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption, especially the ending, but still love the movie. It's nearly flawless. I loved Red's explanation about why he's called Red, but I admit it's still a bit unsatisfying, but then we don't always need all the answers. I thought the movie version of Let the Right One In was superior to the book. I know you love The Ninth Gate. I didn't love it, but I didn't hate it. But I love the book it was based on, The Club Dumas by Arturo Perez Reverte. Discovering that writer also led me to the novels about Captain Alatriste, who is played in the movie Alatriste by Viggo Mortensen. The movie versus book debate is also complicated by the occasional really quality novelization. I'm looking forward to reading Tarantino's novelization of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. He's talked about how if he hadn't been a director, he would have been a novelist. We'll see if he's got the chops. It's a safe bet that he does. I love the novelization of Rob Roy. When I was a kid, I read a few novelizations, including Back to the Future 2, and I think one of the Karate Kid movies. This was back when it was kind of hard to see movies anytime you wanted to, and even renting them could be difficult if it was a new release. People who are nostalgic for video rental stores forget the frustration of having to wait for a popular title to be available. Nowadays, it seems like the comic books are secondary to the movies based on them. The movies are what got Marvel out of the red. They're what made Disney want to buy Marvel. They're why DC keeps trying. But maybe the comics themselves and not just the movies would be more popular if they were honest about being junk, as Jules Pfeiffer said in his book, The Great Comic Book Heroes. Quote, junk as in second-class citizens of the arts. There are certain inherent privileges in second-class citizenship. Irresponsibility is one. Not being taken seriously is another. Junk, like the drunk at the wedding, can get away with doing or saying anything because by its very appearance, it's already in disgrace. Maybe comic books, and the movies too, should stop trying to be respectable. There was a joke in an early Simpsons where a comic book in the library of a gifted school was explained as a forgotten prop from a film they made about illiteracy. Geek interests have become much more acceptable in past decades. I was in high school in the 90s, and geek or nerd were not titles that anyone would have self-applied. It's good in some ways that this stuff has gained more widespread acceptance, but I'm not sure if full mainstream acceptance of this stuff is a good thing. It's for the money men, of course, more ticket sales, but you lose something maybe as well. It's like being a porn star. You pay a social price, but hey, you get to be a porn star. I thought I'd write in about this to get your thoughts on it and that of the Post-Geek Singularity. Nuff said. Well, Joe, great letter, man. Thanks a lot for writing that in. Very compelling, very interesting. In the case of something like Thanos, first of all, you have to explain the anthropomorphization of death, like death being a person. And I think for a lot of moviegoers, I'm working on a project myself personally that I've wanted to make for a long time that a lot of people couldn't wrap their heads around when I wanted to make it 20 years ago, because the personification of ideas like death, to anthropomorphize them and turn them into people, is something that people couldn't wrap their heads around. They're like, wait, what? And I was like, what? Didn't you guys see Oh God when you were growing up? God is manifested as George Burns. I mean, I think ever since then, I've always liked the idea of these infinite creatures coming down and walking. I mean, maybe Zeus, too, when he was playing with humanity, coming down, taking human form or the form of animals or whatever, and seducing poor humans, having his way with the ladies. I mean, I always thought that was interesting, not because I wanted to be Zeus and I wanted to have my way with the ladies, but consensually, of course. But I always liked that idea that these all-powerful beings that could control the cosmos didn't know what it was like to walk amongst human beings. And I think that they've to me, the Time Variance Authority is about as crazy and outlandish as Marvel can get. I just think even having death, doing things because you're obsessed with death, and having the personification of death be a hot woman, I think that was a little too far. I think the Time Variance Authority might be going a little too far as well, but we'll see how it ends up in 4 more episodes. But I think, look, I understand where you're coming from. I think the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the problem is, look, it's gotten so successful that everyone looks at it and it's kind of pushed all the other franchises out. To be honest with you, as much as I love the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I'd be much more interested if there was no Marvel Cinematic Universe and we got more science fiction films like Denis Villeneuve's output, like Arrival, like Blade Runner 2049, and Dune. I would much rather see those, an original, a sequel, and sort of a readaptation of a book. That's what I want. I want original stuff. I'm enjoying the Marvel Cinematic Universe because I love seeing the translation of these characters on the big screen. And I think for the most part, it has been, dare I say it, marvelous. What an embarrassment of riches. We're going to get the 24th movie soon. We've had 23 movies, and I think the quality, as far as I look upon them as fantasy and science fiction filmmaking, and I think for the most part, it's been pretty good. So I've enjoyed them. So, yeah, I mean, I thought those things are pretty good. But yeah, I mean, I can understand where you're coming from. It's hard to adapt books into movies. It's a really hard thing to do. And when it happens, like with Shawshank Redemption, and it's marvelous, but remember that movie was a flop when it first came out. I think it's amazing. I live for that kind of stuff. Kubrick mostly adapted books. Sometimes he took a serious book and he turned it into a comedy, like Dr. Strangelove. But I thought, great stuff. So yeah. But a great letter, really, really thought-provoking, a very much a thought thought-provoking letter. I quite enjoyed it. I'm going to come over and see where y'all are at right now. Where are you all at? I'll tell you where you're at. You're with Willow Yang, ladies and gentlemen. Willow Yang is here. Willow Yang says, what do you think of the UFOs that were being talked about in the news actually are? Do you really believe that they are extraterrestrials? Well, clearly there's something there. Now, I grew up as somebody that, look, I'm like Fox Mulder. I want to believe. I do think that the UFOs, the unidentified aerial phenomenon, the UAPs, they seem to have enough data that whatever they're seeing is real. I don't know. I mean, it sounds, just from the reports we get, it sounds to me it's like joyriding teenagers. And if those teenagers are, in fact, extraterrestrial, hey, more power to them. Maybe it's just super secret drones. I don't know. But again, I think, like, I'm kind of the opinion that we, because we're human beings, we believe that if aliens came to Earth Independence Day style, that they would somehow, I don't know, that we would have some kind of a relationship with them. But like in Independence Day, if we hadn't taken any aliens captive and didn't have one of their ships on ice, they didn't even talk to us. They just showed up and began the extermination of mankind. I kind of think if there were really advanced extraterrestrials and they came to Earth like that and they just wanted to take our resources and they didn't recognize that we were here, then they would do that. But I want to believe that, and unless we're all monumentally naive, I want to believe that any sufficiently intelligent life form is they're also looking to not be alone in the universe. I mean, maybe I could be wrong because our world has been conditioned to believe only certain things. So it's one thing or another with me. I don't know. I'd like them to be extraterrestrials, to be honest. I don't know if there's any way to prove it, but I think if extraterrestrials like that were on Earth, they're aware of our existence, but it'd be like us, when we pass by a gopher hole or an ant hill or something that's full of a vast civilization of ants, we don't care. We just pour molten lead down an anthill just so we can then dig it up and see what the molten lead looks like, so we can see, wow, look at how big this ant civilization was that we just subjected to a molten apocalypse. We just don't care. We don't care about it. Most of the species that are on this planet, we barely take notice of. And why should we believe that very advanced extraterrestrials that come to Earth would be paying attention to us at all? I'd like to believe they're extraterrestrials, though. The technology is certainly compelling. Sends in a diamond super chat badge. Thank you for that. How are you today? Michael sends in a tip and says, hey, Rob, I hope you don't mind. I wanted to give a shout out to a channel I recently stumbled on, Twin Flicks. Have you heard of them? They do great 4K and Blu-ray quality reviews if they're worth picking up, along with a brief review of the movie. Good stuff. Oh, I think we might be familiar with Twin Flicks around these parts. Go figure. No, I like the Twin Flicks channel, and I think everybody should go. But after, of course, subscribing to this channel first. Michael said, holy shit, I just found out they have some interviews with high-up people like Brandon Braga and Alex Proyas. Good channel for any imagination connoisseur. By the way, Rob, your channel is awesome, too. I love this space here on YouTube. Well, if you look closely, the Twin Flicks folks might be closer than even you might think. I'm just saying. Just look out. But thank you for the compliments, Michael. I appreciate that. Royce Freeman sends in a super chat and said, not sure if you got into my question the other day, but what do you think of the 4K Basic Instinct and then putting extra nudity in Stone and Stone being mad? First of all, Royce, I did get into that. I did talk about that. They did not put in any extra nudity into Basic Instinct that wasn't already there. Having now obtained, yes, I have my 4K version of the film, and watching the disc, it's a beautiful disc. It is by far the best transfer of Basic Instinct that has ever existed. I still think it might have a little too much teal in it, in the transfer, but I was still very, very happy with how the movie looks. It looks terrific. Thank you, Studio Canal, for giving it to us. But it looks great. They did not, it's just the international version. And more than anything, while yes, indeed, there is more nudity in it, but not much more. There's much more violence, believe it or not. So there you go. But I did read that, but I'll say it again, and I'm looking forward. I'm looking forward to delving more into it. I've watched some of the new documentary, which is pretty good. They interviewed Joe Esterhaus too, which is pretty great. Although the filmmakers do spend a lot of time on their graphics. The beginning was like, come on, guys, don't spend 25 minutes putting your credits on the front of your documentary. Don't do that. Says DS9 will always be my favorite. Well, that's good. It's one of my favorite suits. I think it's my favorite series overall outside of the original. So, yeah. Lieutenant Commander Salinga says, if you want to see a masterful interview, watch the TNG actors reunion with Rob on the TNG Blu-ray sets. Why, thank you for that. I very much appreciate it. Wait a minute. Hold on a second. I'm going to take this real quick. Hello? This is, I'm just asking. I'm doing this live. Oh. Yes. Whenever T-Mobile calls, I listen. Anyway, so what Lieutenant Commander Salinga said, if you want to see a masterful interview, I had to read this again, watch the TNG actors reunion with Rob on the TNG Blu-ray sets. Perfection. Any anecdotes from the encounters not on the Blu-rays? Knowing what you know now about the path of Trek, would you ask different questions? Ooh, good question, Lieutenant Commander Salinga. Well, I'll tell you something. I had to cut out, so for those of you who don't know, I, on camera, was the host of a roundtable conversation with the principal cast of Next Generation. Will Wheaton on up to Patrick Stewart, and it's about an hour-long conversation. It appears on the Season 2 disc, certainly a highlight of my life, but I'll tell you something that was really interesting. So I asked them, and we got into the question of whether or not Next Generation would ever be rebooted with new cast members, and what would that feel like? And I brought up, we talked about the J.J. Abrams reboot of the original series cast, and Patrick Stewart started, and it was very cute. He goes, well, I already know what it's like to have my Professor X character rebooted with a younger actor. And we had a really great conversation. And I get a note back from legal, because I was editing the thing myself. We could not, and they riffed on the J.J. Abrams movies. Nope. We couldn't say anything about the J.J. Abrams movies. They were not allowed to opine on them at all. And I thought, what? That's how crazy they are with the Star Trek rights. So they could not talk about the J.J. Abrams Star Trek movies at all. Couldn't mention them. We couldn't even refer to them. And I thought, wow, that's how odd. I mean, I guess the rights deals are split. It's very weird. The whole thing was weird, and the problem was the conversation was awesome, and the only people that miss out are the fans when those kinds of things are, especially because Patrick Stewart. The whole point was that he'd already been replaced in the X-Men movies, at least in X-Men First Class, and then of course Days of Future Past hadn't happened yet. So, but he knew what it was like, and it was really cute. Rebecca Lynn is here. Rebecca Lynn says, hey, Rob, I'm a sexy trans girl who would love to have you fuck me. Important Trek question. What's everyone's favorite Enterprise design? Doesn't have to be the NCC 1701 either. Am I the only one who liked the NCC 1701E? Kisses, Rob. Well, Rebecca, I'll tell you, if I was single and not hopelessly devoted to Elizabeth, I would certainly entertain the thought. So there you go. And again, I'd have to be attracted to you, but maybe it's not something that would be out of the realm of possibility. After all, this is a show that we talk about having sex with xenomorphs. So if you're a sexy trans girl, I would certainly find it much more easy to spend a sexy night with you than an alien creature. No. So, yeah, and I'll take your word for it, Rebecca. What a great name, too, Rebecca Lynn. I think we'd probably be able to go out and have a good time. Unfortunately, I'm not single. But if I was, hey, the question is, you are asking me out. So does that mean you're going to buy me dinner? Or am I buying dinner? That's what we have to ask. That's what we have to find out. As for the sexy, look, I'm all about the warp nacelles. You know what I'm saying? My favorite science fiction spaceship of all time is the NCC 1701 refit from Star Trek The Motion Picture. Of course, I love the original Star Trek. I love it. I love the original Enterprise. I love it. But to me, the refit was, I didn't see how they could make the Enterprise even cooler than it was, but I've got to go with the Enterprise. I got to go with the Enterprise in the motion picture. It's my favorite starship of all time. They souped it up just enough, but kept those perfect lines. They made, in my mind, they made the Enterprise even better than it was. So that is my favorite starship. I think the E is great. The E was introduced in First Contact. It's a very sexy ship. I really enjoy it too. I do. You know, I do like the more of the raised nacelles and saucer section. I think those are better. But yeah. So, but Rebecca, I'll tell you, if I somehow, I hope I don't ever become single again. But if I did, I'll definitely keep you in mind, and we'll go out. You know, take a walk on the wild side. I have no problem with that. Latino Slant, Paulie's here. He sends in a super chat and says, RMB, on the risk of sounding silly, you are marvelous. Well, thank you, Latino Slant. I appreciate that. You too, right back at you, sir. I think what you're doing. By the way, we're going to have something. We're going to be introducing something on the Burnettwork soon that I think you'll be interested in. Shh, I can't say what that is yet, but it's pretty funny. Louis Terraza says, Robster, what did I do wrong, man? Will you ever have me on? That link was whack. I've never sent out a whack link, Louis. Other people get on. It's the same link. I don't know why. I'd love to have you on. I'd love to have you on the show. Come on the show. I'll put you in, coach. As a matter of fact, why not? I'll do it right now. How about that? I'll make a link to this show, and if you get here on time, I'll just do it. Why not? I'll send out a link. People want to come on the show right now. If you've got a decent webcam and you've got a decent microphone, why not? I've been doing it on other shows. People want to come on Robservations. Well, who am I to say no? So, hey, people, if you're ready, I'll put it in the live chat. We'll see who shows up. But bam, there it is. Link is in the live chat. We'll see if anyone is here. I've got room for 2. Room for 1 more, honey. And that was from a Twilight Zone episode. Just thought you should know that. So, yeah, I'm saying, if you want to come on the show, we'll see if anybody does show up, Louis. There's your chance. Link is not whack. Papas V, or Papas 5, says, hello, Rob. I don't know why everyone is upset at Harrison Ford. My papa lived until 102 and was strong as an ox. But I don't think Indy 5 will be good. Nazis again? Kind of crazy. Haha. What do you think? I think this. I think the opening of the movie is going to be a flashback scene with Nazis that's going to show how the Nazis have done something in the past that is going to resonate in the 60s or the 70s, wherever this movie is set. And I think that's what we're going to get. So I think that maybe people sympathetic to their cause, kind of like how Nazis were also villains in Sum of All Fears, even though it was a modern movie. It was like, far-right extremists, call it what you want. So that's what I think is going on. But congratulations to your papa for living to be 102. How amazing is that? My grandfather died at 97. He was so looking forward to being 100. And he was really in great shape, too. He worked out. He just had a heart attack, and he had a heart attack, and he called a cab that took him to the hospital, but they wouldn't operate on him. They could have saved his life, but they won't. They won't put anybody under general anesthetic that is that age. Ooh, Stubble McShave has thoughts on Amazon's new inclusion policy. Yeah, I'm not a big fan. Not a big fan of the inclusion policy, but to be honest, I read that they have a new inclusion policy, and I think it's odd, but I understand where people have their heart in the right place. But hang on, since you sent me the link, I am only, let's see. Okay, here it is. Here's Stubble's question. Amazon Studios sets inclusion policy and playbook for its content and productions. Here's what they say. Amazon Studios on Wednesday, meaning yesterday, unveiled a division-wide policy that underscores its commitment to diversity, inclusion, and equity for its content and productions, along with a playbook that includes guidelines for its collaborators in the creative community. The policy covers 4 primary areas that offer actionable recommendations to continue to seek out storytelling that amplifies diverse voices throughout all aspects of the production process. Developing stories and characters, hiring and production, reporting and documentation, and meeting goals. The policy includes specific goals for Amazon Studio-based productions, including each film or series with a creative team of 3 or more people in the above-the-line roles, directors, writers, and producers, should ideally include a minimum 30% women and 30% members of an underrepresented racial ethnic group. I think that's fine, although there aren't 30% underestimated or underrepresented ethnic groups in the world. I mean, our population is 15% black, so I think that's a big number. This aspirational goal will increase to 50% by 2024. It does say aspirational. Casting actors whose identity, gender identity, nationality, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, or disability aligns with the character they will be playing. Aiming to include 1 character from each of the following categories in speaking roles, with a minimum 50% of these to be women, LGBTQIA, a person with a disability, and 3 regionally underrepresented race, ethnic, and cultural groups. A single character can fulfill 1 or more of these identities, seeking at least 3 bids from vendors or suppliers on productions, 1 of which must be from a woman-owned business and 1 from a minority-owned business. Pay equity across casting, behind the camera, crew, and staff, and for vendors and suppliers. With the establishment of our inclusion policy and inclusion playbook, Amazon Studios has committed itself to being a thought and action leader in transformation of our industry, said Jennifer Salke, head of Amazon Studios. We know how much work there is to be done to improve representation both on camera and behind the scenes, and it starts at home with us. With clear directives and a commitment to accountability, those guides provide a path toward a more equitable future both on and off camera. The company said it will provide a report template for its productions to indicate whether these expectations were met, to be submitted within 1 month of the completion of principal photography. What do I think about that? Well, I mean, I think that in theory that's good, but I would say that the motion picture and entertainment business is still a very niche business, and sometimes it's not possible to find all of these things. But I think aspiring to do that is fine. I don't know what would happen though if you're making a movie about, say, World War I. And you're talking about you're making a British film. What do you do if you're making 1917? Would you be allowed to make 1917 under these guidelines? I know they're aspirational, so maybe you would. But here's the thing. While I think these kinds of guidelines are good guidelines to have, and I love the idea that they're bringing stories forth, I think that's really important. But I also think that ultimately the good of the project that you're making has to be of paramount importance. The film itself. It's great that you want to get people to a diverse cast and crew. That's great. But really, what should first and foremost serve the production is the story itself. By making these arbitrary things that you have to have, immediately it might limit stories. Well, we're not going to tell stories about battle in World War I anymore because it doesn't fit our diversity guidelines. The first time that happens, the first time these diversity guidelines get in the way of telling stories, that's when we know the diversity guidelines need to be. I don't think that's the smartest move in the world. I like the idea of it though, but the actual guidelines, hey, more power to you. You still have to hire people who know how to do their jobs. So Ted, it's not Terrier. What did I say? Ted says, Rob, there are no chicks with dicks, only guys with tits. I disagree, Ted. I disagree. I've actually met a couple of beautiful women in my life that also had beautiful penises. I know it might seem counterproductive, but it's true. So there you go. Although I have to tell you, I have not met as many guys with breasts. I would say I've met more women, beautiful women with great penises. That Jim Morrison would say in The Doors, "You got a great penis," but they were women through and through. I will say that. I'll let you make of that what you will. Anyway, We've got Rick Squire saying, your thoughts on Nightbreed? I thought the concept was very creative, but there's aspects of the film I felt quite lacking. Nonetheless, I still enjoy watching it. Rick, you and I park our shuttlecrafts in the same shuttle bay. 100%. Absolutely. Daryl the Derelict is here, and I've got to put my sound on so he can actually hear me for what I'm saying. Daryl, can you hear me? Oh, you sound great. 5x5. I love that. And I'm going to bring you along with, look, Louis. I would hope this is Louis Terrazas. Louis, are you there, sir? I can see that you're here in the chat, but I can't see you. I can hear you. All right. Well, I'm putting you on. I'm going to put you both on the show. How do you feel about that? All right. Well, hang on. It's going to take me a minute to, we're talking about chicks with dicks, and I'm like getting all hot and bothered, man. I actually have my issue of Transgender Quarterly right over there that has Dax on the cover. It's the Deep Space Nine issue of. How's it going, man? Hang on, I'm gonna let me just put you guys in for a minute. It's gonna take me a minute. It's gonna take me a sec. I'm going to add. Let me take that away. Well, hang on. I got to put you in because no one can hear you yet. So I'm gonna call you Louis, and then I'm gonna call Daryl. Maybe I can fit Daryl the Derelict down. Why not? I'll try and fit Daryl. I'll put this on your lower third here because why not? If I can do that. So hold on, people. I'm producing this stuff live. Dery Daryl. I'm doing good. Hang on though, because people can't hear you yet. I got to put you in the show. Just give me a minute, and then I'll put you in. Daryl the Derelict is there, so I'm going to add you to the show. Daryl, you get the right square. Daryl gets the right square, and Louis gets the center square. How about that? All right. So Daryl, I want to know if Daryl the Derelict is really a derelict. Do you spend most of your time on the street? Oh, well, there you go. You're gonna wait. Don't hold all these already. I'm laughing. Hold all the witticisms. Let me just add Louis Terrazas into the chat, and let me get you down here and put you on the show. Put you in, coach. All right. Yeah. Now I feel I have to have a game. I don't really have a game to play. Shall we play a game? The only game is not, or the best game is not to play at all. So, ladies and gentlemen, nice. We have Louis in the center square, and of course, Daryl the Derelict is on the right-hand side. So, gentlemen, welcome to Robservations episode 708, the show about something. I want to ask both of you, would you consider yourself imagination connoisseurs?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
100%, Rob.
Oh, yeah.
So let me start with you, Louis. When did you know that you were an imagination connoisseur?
I mean, I think it was like a long time ago when my mom. I've been telling you in my letters, a lot of the times through my childhood, I've had to get over things, but a lot of that helped was film. So like going to the movie theater, and I started thinking, how can I be creative? And then later on, I actually studied film in undergrad, and I made my own movies. So I was like, wow. I love the creative process.
That's great to hear. What about you, Daryl?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on.
Absolutely.
Big
Thanks
fan.
for braving the show.
No, hey, I'm ready to try anything at this age.
I know. I feel that way all day.
No, my creative imagination started in May of 1977 when I witnessed Star Wars for the first time. Nice. I was 6 years old. Thank you, Mr. Dog, for barking at me. Thank you.
This is a very dog-friendly show.
I'm on with Robert Meyer Burnett. Shut up.
We can have dogs bark. It's okay.
But yeah, once I saw that movie, it just absolutely blew me away. And I have been looking up at the stars ever since and just thinking of all kinds of stuff. Mm-hmm. Just all kinds of creative stuff.
I am right there with you, 100%. So, Louis, what was your gateway drug? Was there one movie or one show or video game or comic or TV series? What was it?
I mean, I'm kind of like you. I'm not a super Star Trek fan, but I was always into sci-fi for sure. Like I was telling you in one of the things I sent in, my dad had like Total Recall, RoboCop, So I loved all that kind of stuff. And Indiana Jones: Last Crusade is definitely one of my favorite movies.
Okay.
So I love that kind of stuff. I wish there was more sci-fi like that. Like I was telling you the other day, we're really missing like someone like Verhoeven, because we don't have that kind of mid-level movie.
No.
Where it's some really good raw sci-fi that's a very imaginative like that. What
I
that
agree.
guy brought to Hollywood was amazing.
No, and I mean I was a huge fan of his Dutch movies. He made a great thriller that was a precursor to Basic Instinct called The Fourth Man that I really
it's so
love.
good.
So
Yeah.
good. And movies like Spetters and Soldier of Orange and Katie Tipple and Turkish Delight. So he had a long storied career, award-winning career in Holland before he came to America. And you know, I like you said, I thought he brought something very unique to the genre. So, Daryl, let me ask you this: after Star Wars, did that lead you into science fiction as a medium? Did you start reading science fiction novels, or just watching science fiction movies, or how'd that work?
Both. I actually, the following year, Splinter of the Mind's Eye by Alan Dean Foster came out.
Yep.
I snagged it up, and I still have it.
And that's the first instance of a Kyber crystal that is
Yeah.
now incorporated into Star Wars mythology, all the way back to Alan Dean Foster's Splinter of the Mind's Eye, and it became part of real canonical Star Trek lore. So
Yeah, and as a result, I saw that Mr. Foster had written a lot of Star Trek books.
Yep.
So I read a couple of those, and
I
saw
hate
the
to admit
series
I have
in
one
reruns.
right here where he wrote a Kelvin Universe Star Trek novel. I know people are going to be like, Rob, you bought a Kelvin Universe Star Trek novel? I mean, okay. You know what? What can I say?
Oh, Rob, can I ask you something about that?
You can.
What is it about Star Trek that it just invigorates you so much? Like it's like your soul, right? Like for you, Star Trek is just.
I would. You know what I think ultimately? Well, first of all, the speculative fiction aspect about it, the science fiction aspect of it, always attracted me. But I love the fact that there are three people, very different kinds of people, that are great friends, and that still respect one another. But they need one another to go discover the secrets of the universe. And I think that's, and ultimately it's aspirational to me because it shows what we can do if we work together as a group. You know, and I'm not into group identity or tribal identity. The point is you had three individuals who all brought something to the party and are good at their jobs. Everybody in Star Trek was good at their jobs. I like that idea. You know, and I think that's what we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be, it's like, be like the character. Here's Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. Be like Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. And they were always the people that I wanted to be. Or if I couldn't be Kirk, I'd want to be Spock or Dr. McCoy, but I'd want to work with those two guys in achieving things and going out into the universe. But also the stories, the stories that they told fired my imagination. And the great thing about Star Trek was every story was different. You know, you never knew when I was a little kid. One day there might be a slightly comedic episode where they become Chicago gangsters, and then but the whole idea of it is that they've met this group of people, and even the gangster land, the inhabitants of Sigma Iosha, they weren't open to ridicule, even though they'd patterned their entire civilization around one book, Chicago Mobs of the 20s, that was left by the horizon 100 years earlier. They were really good at what they did. They were smart, imitative people that really understood technology, and they got it. And even though it was goofy, it was still really thought-provoking and interesting. So I grew up a Jew and watching Patterns of Force, the Nazi episode of Star Trek. You had a Federation sociologist that thought a civilization was so moribund that he looked into Earth's past and he's like, well, what is the one thing that kick-started a civilization in Earth's history? Oh, yeah, National Socialism. Maybe I can bring about National Socialism and not have the engine it needed to continue, which is hatred of the Jews. So, they hated their neighboring planet Zeon. It's Zeon. Zeon's from Gundam. But, so, all that stuff was just, it fired my imagination. So, now let me ask you guys this. So, growing up with all of this material, how has your imagination connoisseurship changed over the years? I guess start with you, Daryl. You started with Star Wars. that was a big influence on me too. And so we lived through ground zero of what has become many, many classics of the genre, whether it's Alien, whether it's Back to the Future, whether it's Blade Runner. What was it like for you growing up after Star Wars? How did that affect how you became an imagination connoisseur into later in life?
It just, I don't know, it just spread like a wildfire. Once I saw Star Wars and then read Splinter of the Mind's Eye, the next year in '79, I saw Alien, had nightmares for 2 weeks. But that being said, I still loved it. And then Empire came out the next year. And actually, I'm sorry, in '79, also Star Trek: The Motion Picture came out.
Yes, it did.
And I watched it, and I loved, like you, I loved the redesigned Enterprise. It was glorious. It was beautiful. And, I had to watch it because I was so young. I had to watch it 2 or 3 times to understand what it was and what it meant at the end with V'ger and everything. And it just snowballed. I mean, every science fiction thing that came out, regardless of how good it was or how bad it was, I watched it.
Yeah.
And my wife hates me for this, but I love a good bad movie.
Okay, now let me ask you this. Would that include something like Sharknado as a bad movie? Because those, to me, I can't hang with those movies because I can't deal with the campiness. But like, I'll watch a movie like The Specialist with Sylvester Stallone and Sharon Stone, which is not a good movie, but it's great. It's a great bad movie. So how do you?
I know what you mean by that, Rob. I agree with that.
Yeah. How do you define it, Daryl?
Sharknado is a little too much.
Yep. Because it knows it's trying to do what it's trying to do. You can't set out to make a campy movie. It doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean, like, Cowboys versus Aliens.
Right.
That was a great bad movie. And I love it.
Battleship is a great bad movie.
Yes, I love that one.
Yeah.
Absolutely love it. Battle Los Angeles, even more terrible movie. I love it.
What about you, Louis?
Oh, for me, that's an easy question. I used to go to the Sweaties as a kid too. My mom would drop me off, and I'd see some comics, and so like seeing the technology, right? Like I'm an older millennial, but even when X-Men first came out, it's like they could do certain things in technology, and then now like seeing the special effects and all that just getting better and better.
Oh yeah.
For me, it's like wow. Like I mean, for you guys, like you said on Campia's show, it's like amazing, right? Like things you thought you'd never imagine that you'd see on the big screen. So it's like. It's very surreal that you can see those comic book stories like laid out in big screen, like seeing Endgame. But one thing I agree with him though, even though I have my issues with Campia, is I think it was better when it was like so many different studios owned different properties because you saw different iterations and it was I think better segmented like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're getting a lot less diversity, and when I say diversity, I mean diversity in stories, the kinds of movies that were getting made. I mean. I don't know if we would get a RoboCop, we got a remake of RoboCop, but we wouldn't have got. Would somebody make RoboCop if we'd never heard of it before? Would they make it today? No. Or a movie like Gattaca, which I'm a huge Gattaca fan, or Children of Men. I mean, would these movies get made today? I doubt it, which is unfortunate. And I think that Hollywood does, in fact, have a lot to do with our culture in terms of reflecting our culture back at us. And I think I really find the movies that are coming out today, like Basic Instinct. I got the 4K on. Who's going to make an erotic thriller today?
No way in this like Me Too climate, Ron.
It's really bizarre.
No way.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it and you're like, what? You're going to deny human nature? I mean, I feel like we're infantilizing ourselves out of our own humanity by saying that people don't. What you can't have lustful thoughts anymore, and nope, we have to sign a contract first. But that's not people. I'm not saying that look, everything should be consensual, but also 2 adult people know when it's consensual. They understand, and it's like we're bleeding. We want to handhold our entire civilization, and it's not going to end well.
Hey, Rob, but did you see what Sharon Stone said the like last month, I think, when she was interviewed and said that she didn't consent to that when she like opened her legs? What do you think of that?
Well, I mean, when she was making the movie, she talked. Those stories have gone back and forth. Everyone's changed their.
You think it's BS?
I don't think it's BS, but I'm sure that it's a little different now than it was 30 years ago. Right. But the new disc is great. And I think also Sharon Stone. There's no X-rated material that was added into the movie. The movie that was released is the uncut version, which has a little bit more violence. The same was true of, and there is a little bit more nudity, but not anything
Not
that's
grossly. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, I think when, and by the way, when you watch it, it's so quick. It goes by so fast, but it's such a great look.
I always pause it though.
if anything is great for a scene, that emasculates all of those men in that room. I mean, she's supposed to be manipulating them, and she does what only a woman can do with that moment, and every man is shocked. And I think every man sitting in the audience seeing Basic Instinct when it opened was shocked too, and that's why I think it works. So,
Hey, but Rob, let me ask you this real quick, because you always talk. I love when you talk about the business of movies. You know, as I told you, I'm doing my MBA.
right.
So I find it curious because I used to hear this back in the day. I had some industry friends. They used to tell me that like big venture capitalist firms or like Chinese investors would come to Hollywood. They'd have pitch meetings, right, at the studios, and the studios would tell them like, we have to make these 10 mid-level movies, these 5 big, like, you know, hopefully the $1 billion movies. But they would tell me stories that the Chinese would always tell them, well, why do we have to make the ones that might not make money? I really think like a lot of this influence has got to Hollywood, where it's like, yeah, we don't even want to be risky anymore. No more gut feeling type of thinking. Let's just do analytics, and let's just try to go for the big guns. Because to me, that's the only reasoning why they don't do those mid-level movies anymore. And Netflix too, probably.
I think there's a lot of truth in that. That's why, you know, Netflix isn't reliant upon box office. Neither is HBO Max. I mean, they don't have to make money at the box office, so they really can make everything that they want to make. And I think that's both a good thing and a bad thing. I think the real problem is the people that are now deciding what stories that should or shouldn't be made. Look, they don't have a story background. Mm-hmm. They haven't read lots of books. They haven't even seen lots of movies. There are very few people in the business that are in the business at that level who truly love cinema or know anything about cinema. And it's incredibly frustrating as a filmmaker to go into these meetings and pitch people on things. There are some really good executives, but to pitch people on things and you're trying to convince them, and they don't know what you're talking about. You know, you're making references to movies, and I know that they have no idea what I'm talking about. And the thing is, you would expect people. Movie making is the only business in the world where the people that are running things don't necessarily have to know anything about movies.
Right.
And it's frustrating. It's very frustrating. No other business would ever work that way.
Daryl, what do you think of that?
Oh, I agree. I mean, it's just absolutely terrible the way things have been carried up until this point, and it just doesn't seem to be getting any better.
Yeah.
They just keep echoing and echoing and echoing and kicking out anybody who has a different opinion. And it's like, yes, let's make all this, you know, let's throw out this cinematic suppository, shove it up their ass and tell them to take it, you know. It's stupid.
Well,
and it's going to end up biting them in the ass.
I mean, to be fair, they are trying to make – nobody wants to make a bad movie. And especially with the money they're spending, they don't want to make bad movies. But the problem is, like I've always said on the show, it's not like they're making movies from filmmakers that are passionate about certain projects. What happens is filmmakers start in the indie level now. They'll make a passion project like, you know, Colin Trevorrow makes Safety Not Guaranteed, which is $1 million movie, and then Spielberg likes it, and suddenly he's making Jurassic World, and that's fine. But how do you develop a career? And when you go to a studio, it used to be filmmakers, auteurist filmmakers or whatever, could bring in their projects that they're passionate about. Studios would make them because they believe in the filmmaker. Now it's the opposite. Now studios decide, okay, we're going to make this movie based on our IP. Let's hire this person to do it. And it's not based on passion. And when you're making art, I mean, movies are a collision of art and commerce. And all the great movies were made by people that were very passionate about what they were doing. You seldom had a director or a star who's phoning in a performance that's going to give you a great film. All of the, you know, and a lot of, like, Coppola was fighting a huge battle just to get through The Godfather when he made it. And luckily, he was able to get through because he believed in it, and he was a true auteur, and he was in it, man. He was in it for the long haul. But, you know, I think the real problem with Hollywood now, the biggest problem is that, and it's changing because the streamers will become more talent oriented. They will, if they like filmmakers, it's easier to get a job at a streamer, I think, making a movie if you are a passionate creative. That's why a lot of people are jumping ship and going to the streaming services, because they can make their passion projects. If Netflix agrees to make one and agrees to finance it, the movie will get made. And if it's great, great, then we all win, and they get a lot of viewers and maybe more subscribers. But if they don't, it's not going to be a career ender because you lost $200 million at the box office.
Right.
So,
hey Rob, but have you ever thought that this is maybe like because the last 20 years has been pretty much comic book movies and sequels?
yeah.
I mean, obviously we love the comic book movies, but it's kind of like, what else would a financial person in the studio do? Like, they're like, this is going to hit. Why would I risk on any of that stuff? Do you ever talk about that?
That's exactly, yeah, we talk about that amongst ourselves. We talked about it on the show. I mean, that's the big dilemma in Hollywood, because movies are so expensive, because studios now have got them, they're only in the mindset of making $150 million or $200 million tentpole movies that gross $1 billion. That's the only business they're in right now.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I think that's not necessarily a great business. That's why I was talking earlier today on a different stream. A guy like Jason Blumhouse, he's making movies for his model is $5 million or under. And if you make a great movie, we'll get it theatrically released through Universal. Invisible Man, Lee Whannell's Invisible Man costs $8 million. It makes $100 million. For a smaller company, that's a huge, even with the marketing budget, that's a huge return.
Oh yeah,
So,
that's pure cash. Yeah.
But then again, it's only $100 million. So you'd have to make 10 movies, which is $100 million to make a $1 billion movie. So, and then you have to risk. It's a lot harder to make 10 movies that are really great than one movie that'll make $1 billion. So,
yeah, I think it's crazy, man. Like I love the comic book movies again, but like I kind of hope this model kind of reverses itself once. Like, how do you see it happening in 10 years? Like,
well, I think everything runs in cycles. I mean, eventually there's going to be a superhero fatigue. Even Marvel, I mean, they have to know they're probably on borrowed time, as long as we like their characters and stuff. But they already told this really great story. The Infinity Saga, all 23 movies with including Spider-Man Far From Home, those 23 movies really work well. And they tell this overarching story that ended and people came back and it was finished. Nowadays, I still feel this way. As much as I've been enjoying the Marvel shows, I think more than a lot of people are, it does feel
awesome.
I think so too. And a lot of people, where are you going to go? How is Marvel going to build back up to that again? Because we're waiting for them to do it. They did it once. Now, we don't yet know, like, what is going to be the next overarching, I guess, the Avengers. I mean, I would imagine it's always going to be the Avengers, because they can bring in whoever they want to be in the. I mean, Shang-Chi was in the Avengers. Moon Knight was in the Avengers. They can bring anybody they want. So we'll see. But what is?
Dude, I agree with so many of your theories. I love all your theories. And Kev is like, nah. I really do think like the. Who were you saying is going to invade? I forget the name right now.
Kang.
Like Kang. Yeah, Kang, and like the Eternals and all that. I agree with all those theories. I think the Eternals look so good, Rob.
I think so too.
It's so different. I'm like, God, I love the new direction. The Loki show, like, they're bringing so many raw elements to it. This is really, I think it's the right direction. I'm really glad.
Oh, I thought the end of episode 2 of Loki was pretty
exciting.
That
was crazy.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, all right. I don't know where it's gonna go, but it looked
in another universe. It's a female Rob. Doing this show.
I know, right? And that's why I would have no problem hooking up with myself in another universe. Hey, you're me as a female. Let's go, babe. What's up?
That'd be crazy. Yeah.
I don't draw any line with my sexuality. I mean, I do, but I don't have to. If no one's gonna know, right?
That Midnighter, where it was like, what alien would you do? God, dude, I love that you've been doing all the midnight shows. I gotta say, Rob, like, remember when we got that idea? Like, I love that you've been doing it. I love that you're like getting so much return for it. Like, you have the network you always dreamt of.
It was pretty fun. We're going to launch a new show that I can't talk about yet, that was actually brought to me by some imagination connoisseurs, and they told me what it was going to be, and they pitched me the title of it. The title's got to be unveiled.
Rob goes down.
No, it's their title, and when I heard the title, it's so good that I can't even, for what the show is and the title is, I'm like, that's genius. So,
that's cool.
And that's something I will not be. I mean, I might guest on that show. I might launch the show, but it's not my show. I didn't come up with it, but I'm really excited because one of the things I've always wanted to do is put other people's shows on the Burnettwork.
Oh, so, okay. So you won't be on it, but it'll be on your network.
It'll be on my network. Okay. It'll definitely be. the Burnettwork
Sweet.
presents kind of a thing.
Nice.
Nice.
So yeah.
Yeah.
So what about you, Daryl? What are you looking forward to in the year coming? Are you looking forward to the Marvel films? Are you a comic book movie fan?
I am a comic book movie fan. However, I didn't read a lot of the comics growing up. I was more of a movie guy.
Right.
And I mean, I still have some comics here and there, but just not really super into it. Yeah, I mean, you know, everybody's given Loki a lot of backlash and stuff like that. But, you know, basically what it boils down to is people fear change, people hate change. Mm-hmm. So when you change one of their favorite characters into something that they don't want, they're going to bitch about it.
Yeah.
I haven't seen episode 2 yet. I'm going to later this evening. So
it's very
I'm keeping
enjoyable.
an open mind.
Yeah, it's very enjoyable. And it's a lot of fun.
Oh, wait, Daryl, what's your all-time favorite movie? What's your all-time movie?
Oh, that is actually a tie.
Oh.
Empire Strikes Back and Revenge of the Sith.
Wow.
Oh, nice.
All right.
An absolute tie. I can't pick one or the other.
A little prequel love.
Dude, I love the prequels.
Let's hear it for the prequel love. I love it.
I read about the Darth Vader Obi-Wan lava duel in a Fandango magazine in 1978.
Yep.
So when 2005 came out and that movie came out, I was in heaven. I could have died then and been happy.
Yep.
I like that fight. I agree. I thought it was good, even though the prequels get trashed on.
I think the prequels are, it's funny, I think they're good Star Wars, but not particularly great movies, only because I think the way they made them hampers the character enjoyment. I think everything is just kind of so stiff and the scripts could use some work, but they're great Star Wars movies, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, the
Wait,
Phantom
what do you mean by that, Rob? There was
everybody
production
stiff.
problems? Or there was
Well, it's just because
production
they shot it with digital sets and it was all green screen and, you know, everyone's, even Sam Jackson's really stiff. Do you believe it's this boy?
Dude, he was just cashing a check. You know it, Rob. He was.
Well,
like,
I think those guys, they wanted to act, but I think they're out of their element. And you need George Lucas was never known as like what the prequels needed was Paul Verhoeven directing. George Lucas should have produced.
Dude, that would have been
Verhoeven
$2 billion easy right there.
Man, those movies. If Paul Verhoeven directed the prequels, they would be the movies that we needed. And so
that would have been cool.
Yeah. Well, so listen, gents. I want to thank you for coming on the show. Of course, we have today we have an after show for members, a members after chat show, which are always fun. So yeah, come on in and ask questions and all that. We're going to do that afterwards. I think at 4:45. But I want to thank Louis Terrazas. Is that how you pronounce your name? Is it Louis or Louis?
No, it's Louis Terrazas.
Okay, Louis Terrazas and Daryl the Derelict. I want to thank them for having the courage to come on board. Robservations.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, gentlemen. It was great to have you both.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks for
real
having
quick,
me.
Rob.
Oh, wait, hang on. Before you start, let me put you back in, Coach. Come back. What were you going to say? What are you going to say, Daryl?
I was going to ask, is there a way I can get a hold of you? I got a couple of things I want to run by you.
The best way to get a hold of me is to send me an email. Just write to the website. Go to the Burnettwork.net website, and just put in the header, personal to Rob.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Cool.
Then
Thank you very much.
All right, gentlemen. Thanks for coming on the show. Good to see you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I will stay metal and actually it's only Wednesday, so I have to wait. Oh no, it's Thursday. Tomorrow's metal. Tomorrow, so all right, gentlemen. Be seeing you. Actually, I should say, be seeing you. Jason S. sends in a tip and says, Amazon just wants to hire and fire people based on their skin color. If they have a good show, I'll watch it on one of those sites that let you watch it all for free just to deprive Amazon of that subscription fee. We'll watch Loki there too. Ha. Well, I mean, look, I think that there is a genuine desire in this day and age to give people a shot that haven't necessarily had that opportunity. And I think that's admirable. But, you know, for me, I don't necessarily think that because hiring crew people, these are technical people. It's very specific. If you're hiring crew members and things, that's one thing. What we really need to do is hire more filmmakers. We need people that have the stories to tell. I think in my experience, like when you're looking at crew people, I've worked with all different kinds of crew people. Behind the scenes people, crew people. Steven Anderson became an imagination connoisseur. Thanks, Steven Anderson. But it's the stories that we need. It's great to hire people, but I don't necessarily think working on a lot of sets as I have, I think that there's been there's a lot more diversity on film sets, productions than you might think. What we need to hear the stories. We need more people of color, underrepresented groups to be actually making films. And again, you know what? Not everybody from those underrepresented groups want to make films. Hollywood in general is hard for everyone. It's hard for everyone. What we want are great stories, well told. So, at first, just hiring people based on their color in Hollywood isn't necessarily going to work because you need very specific kinds of skill sets, and you need those. There's too much money involved to play those kinds of games. But what we really need is we need the storytellers who have stories to tell that we haven't heard yet, whether they're people that are marginalized from different communities. That's what we need. We need to hear the stories that we haven't heard before. Although hiring people of all different backgrounds is admirable, and I approve of it, but not at the expense of the film that you're making. That's the one thing. You can't, movies, you cannot hire people that don't know their jobs. Movie making can be highly technical, and you need skilled labor. And sometimes, even in whatever group, it's hard to find the best people. And I think with movie making, it's not like you're hiring people to work in an office. These are people, it is highly skilled work, and you got to hire the best people. Brendan Sheehy sends in a tip and says, Rob, do you have any insight on how the Amazon acquisition of MGM affects Barbara Broccoli and Michael Wilson's oversight of the Bond franchise? The media seem to indicate it will be business as usual for them, but surely Amazon wants to shape Bond themselves. Look, they can't. The Broccoli family controls the Bond franchise. They might weigh in just the same way that MGM or UA or whatever weighed in, but they're not going to be able to define what Bond is. So remember, MGM, there was a while there where Columbia was distributing the Bond films as well. I believe Casino Royale might have been one of those movies. So I don't think it's going to affect the franchise. I just wonder if Michael Wilson and Barbara Broccoli will continue with the Bond franchise beyond No Time to Die. All that fat money they've made, why bother? You're going to reboot yet another Bond? It's been 5 years since Spectre. If you go on and you do another Bond, Michael Wilson's going to be well into his 80s by then. Is that what he wants to be doing? Maybe he does, but I wouldn't be surprised if after 25 movies since 1962, it'll almost be 60 years, which is crazy. And that's a pretty damn good run for any franchise. So, there you go. And on that note, I'm going to bring episode number 708 of Robservations to an end. I want to thank everybody for generously supporting the channel with tips via tips and super chats, and thank everyone for writing letters. You can write me a letter at the Burnettwork.net website, and you can read all the letters that I read here. I've still got a backlog of letters to go through. I, of course, will be back tonight for the Midnighter, if you're up for that. More imagination connoisseurs appear on the Midnighter. And again, if you do like these chats, please subscribe, and all of that. And I will be back at, I believe, 4:45 for a member chat. If you're interested, if there's no one there, it'll last for a short period of time. But if there are, we'll stay a little longer. And, with the member chats, I can always bring you into them as well. So if you are a member of the channel and you want to join a member chat and you want to come on and have a face-to-face conversation, or you want to go live, I can do that too. And I want to thank my moderating staff. Joshua Levesque is here. Simon Gilmore, Jaron Seeley, The Richard, Justin Toner, Louise X. Sparrow. My God, what a murderer's row of wrench wielders. Well, thank you so much for being part of the channel. You help make it what it is. So thank you. And remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And with that, I would say to all of you, have a better day. And I mean that.